Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation on the convergence of crisis information. I am Xinyan and my collaborators are Sifan and Lucinda. This research is a part of our larger research project. It focuses on developing a framework of a unique phenomena in crisis information acquisition called convergence. Our paper has been accepted by New Media Society and will be published soon.
Hi everyone, my name is Sifan Xu, an assistant professor at the Tom Bright School of Advertising and Public Relations in the University of Tennessee. I will be going over the background of our study and the theoretical framework we are using before I pass it on to the other authors. The main motivation of our doing this study is to understand information behaviors in a very more than complex information environment. As we all know, individuals now have many choices when it comes to where to get information and from whom or what sources. However, in research, we tend to focus more on specific sources or mediums when we try to unpack how information is acquired and what consequences it presents. Even with research that does attempt to understand how multiple mediums and sources shape information-seeking patterns, such as that related to media repertoire, this kind of research does not really link it to how different combinations of sources and mediums lead to what outcomes related to risks. Given this, we aim to understand and examine what convergence patterns emerge, how antecedents drive different convergence patterns, and how convergence patterns relate to different outcomes in a crisis. We proposed a convergence framework to guide our investigations. First, convergence is defined as a phenomenon involving the merging flow of information from various sources on different mediums, such as print media, social media, in a combination of modalities such as visual, textual, and also audio. In this study, we focus on sources and mediums. For sources, according to message convergence theory, people look for consistent patterns among information provided by different sources to develop better understandings of their risks and also gaining a complete picture of the situation. To comprehend the messages, those involved in a disaster tend to go through points of overlap between messages to evaluate the veracity of messages. Information from various sources comes to life through different mediums, creating individuals' convergence experience related to media exposure. This is similar to media repertoire research that aims to understand how individuals use multiple mediums when it comes to their information needs and also consumption of news. Therefore, in this study, we consider the intersection of sources and mediums in information acquisition to parse out convergence patterns. Based on past research, we hypothesized that demographic factors and also personal motivations, including individuals' orientation toward the problem and information verification tendency, can affect convergence patterns. We also hypothesized that certain medium affordances, such as anonymity, interactivity, and also social presence, may also affect convergence patterns based on affordance theory. Finally, we identified trust in official sources or alternative sources as another antecedent in convergence patterns. For outcomes in the current study, we investigate whether convergence patterns affect risk perceptions and preventative action taking. We speculate that a higher level of convergent communication across multiple mediums and sources should infer a higher level of risk perceptions and also encourage individuals to take more protective actions. So here is a summary of key research questions and hypotheses in our study. The first research question examines what kind of convergence patterns emerge. And the second research question and the third research question are to understand some antecedents, such as demographic factors and medium affordances. Hypothesis 1 through 2 tries to understand how personal motivations, one of the identified antecedents, affects convergence patterns. And hypothesis 3 is trying to understand how trust, another antecedent we identified, affects convergence patterns. And finally, hypothesis 4 tries to understand how convergence patterns drive risk-related outcomes, such as risk perceptions and also preventative action taking.
Thank you, Sifan, for introducing the theoretical framework and hypothesis. Now I will continue talking about the methods and results of our study. A U.S. national sample was surveyed during the COVID pandemic in 2021. The total sample size was 620. Using cluster analysis, which is an unsupervised machine learning technique that identifies subgroups of observations in a dataset, we identify 4 types of information consumers based on their use of channels, sources, and media. On the screen, you can see 4 groups of information consumers, and their convergence level ranges from high to low from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So we will talk about each type of information consumers in detail on the following slides. Here is a table of different convergence patterns. First, we had a group of information consumers with the highest level of convergence level. They are called deliberative actives. So they frequently acquired COVID-19 information extensively from a variety of sources, including alternative and official sources through different channels. Results from logistic regressions also show that they had the highest level of education and the highest tendency of information verification. Second, digital utilitarians had a moderate level of convergence, as they sometimes sought COVID information from various sources, mainly through different online channels. So the digital utilitarians tend to be younger, female, and of a relatively higher education level. Third, we have a group of information consumers called traditionalists, who had a moderate level of information seeking and a medium level of convergence tendency. So they tend to rely on television and other authoritative information sources for COVID information. Other sources they use include the doctors, healthcare professionals, and the government agency. So traditionalists tend to be older, male, and of a lower education level, according to our analysis. Last, we have this group of information consumers called inactives. They had minimum level of convergence as they avoided information seeking, particularly from official sources. They were likely to be less educated and felt much less involved in the pandemic. Let me highlight some important results. First, we were able to identify some key antecedents of different convergence patterns. First, higher information verification tendency was associated with a higher level of convergence. Trust in alternative sources could also lead to a higher level of convergence. Both results suggest that the convergence levels were primarily driven by individuals' attempts to verify the information from different sources and mediums, particularly from alternative, unofficial sources that likely provide unfiltered and niche information. But we also found that some media affordances turn out to inhibit convergence, as inactives who valued the anonymity of channels acquired little COVID information and experienced low convergence level. We also found that additional affordances, including social presence and the bandwidth, did not affect convergence patterns. We also identified some important results regarding how different convergence patterns affect the different perceptual and behavioral outcomes. First, higher convergence level translated into higher levels of risk perceptions. However, convergence did not perfectly match people's preventative intentions. Although deliberative actives had the highest level of convergence level and risk perceptions, they were not more likely to take preventative actions as compared with traditionalists. Past research suggests a higher level of information seeking might indicate mulling, a phenomenon where individuals seek excessive crisis information and overly verify information while delaying life-saving measures in disasters. Our research shows that convergence would only be translated to higher preventative actions to a certain degree. In other words, there was a nonlinear relationship between the different levels of convergence and people's preventative behavioral intentions. Overall, our research findings support the need to study source and medium convergence in today's complex media ecology. For more information about our theoretical implications and limitations, please check out our full manuscript. Here, I also want to highlight some future directions related to this piece of work because we are working on a larger research project on convergence. So there might be several potential ways we can extend the current research findings. First, convergence patterns might emerge as a personality trait that impact people's information processing and message acceptance. And second, current media environments see a convergence of information, misinformation, and misleading information. So a research study that examines how people respond to the mix of information with various quality is also one way that we can look into in the future. And third, we might consider the different formats of convergence in crisis information acquisition. For example, we might see the convergence of information in different modalities, including text, visuals, and videos. Do you have any comments or thoughts related to this project? Please feel free to leave a comment or contact us. Any collaboration is welcome. Thank you for listening to our presentation.